Afternoon. At this time, we'd like to call to order the Rail Committee meeting for the City Council of Palo Alto for Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Litkoff-Haynes.
Here.
Councilmember Lowing. Chair Burt.
Here. 2
present, 1 absent.
Okay. Our first item is public comment that is open for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda, but are otherwise within the purview of this committee. And do we have any speakers?
To the chair, we have no speakers at the moment. Okay,
great. So that lets us move into the interagency updates. First, Caltrain, and we have Caltrain present also for our discussion about the Churchill item. So Mike, or I don't know if there's any other updates, or is anyone online that?
Yeah. Sorry, we do have Navi Dhaliwal as well online. I'm not sure if she has any updates she wanted to provide.
Yes. Could everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Well, good afternoon, Chair Burt and council members. My name is Navi Dhaliwal, Acting Government Community Affairs Manager here at Caltrain. And I will provide a short and brief update because, as was mentioned, Michael Meter, our Chief Safety Officer, is present in person, who will dive into details on our safety improvements that we're doing on the right-of-way. So really quickly, you may have already begun to see our new electric trains on the corridor and behind me. We are so excited to be hosting our launch parties this weekend. On September 21st, we are incredibly excited to be hosting our event in Palo Alto. And then on the 22nd, we'll have our large event in the city of San Mateo. I just want to take a moment to say thank you again on behalf of the agency to our council members, the chair, city staff, and members of the public here today. In many ways, you have been so supplemental to the success of Caltrain's electrification, and we are so looking forward to celebrating you and our riders this weekend, as well as the positive impacts of this program for years to come. I wanted to just switch over and provide a brief update, as we did visit City Council yesterday to talk a little bit more about our other major efforts, including our City Partnership Toolkit. And Caltrain is seeking to partner with cities by providing a toolkit and Go Pass incentives to make Caltrain a more attractive and available transportation choice for residents and workers of all incomes. Our local governments hold significant power in transforming community habits, and through cities adopting the most appropriate policies and programs selected from the toolkit, we can create a future where cities thrive, residents and workers enjoy a higher quality of life, Caltrain can thrive, and we all benefit from reduced GHG emissions and enhanced sustainability. As a part of the City Partnership Toolkit, we are looking at transportation demand management, development agreements, local ordinances, transportation management associations, parking management, transit-oriented development, also known as TOD, and station access. And as a part of our update yesterday evening, we also talked briefly about our recently adopted board station access policy plan. Our definition of access for this policy and the agency as a whole is how individuals get to and from our stations. Someone's journey to and from Caltrain stations can include walking, using a mobility device, riding a bicycle, using shared micromobility, taking a bus or another train, driving, or any combination of these. The station access policy emphasizes safe, universally accessible, well-maintained, and seamless connections to Caltrain stations, integration with the local station area and community context, and excellent customer experience for all individuals. As a part of the next series of engagement with the station access policy, we really want to emphasize the benefits to the cities in engaging in the station access policy process. The ability of Caltrain to sustain and expand service will depend in large part on cities actively supporting expansion of ridership to groups beyond Caltrain's traditional core riders. It has been very clear to us that cities drive the fulfillment of the access policy. And as Chair Burt had raised yesterday, similar to the promotion of the Go Pass program, which I thought was an excellent model, Having cities participate and take real ownership of these conversations and policy enables supplemental benefits and goals for other major planning efforts, including RHNA, regional housing needs allocation goals, transit-oriented development near the stations, site activation to bring in more business to or around the station area, and engagement on master planning efforts for bike and pedestrians. This station access policy allows cities to really envision Caltrain as an asset and utilize us as a tool for reaching the city's environmental goals, housing benchmarks, and site activation that will ultimately unlock economic vitality. Caltrain is very excited to talk about this ongoing partnership with the cities, and we really hope that we can have a forum to discuss this at upcoming rail committee, really because we see this as an opportunity to drive and shape the station access policy and the greater partnership between our cities. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was a really helpful update on the access policy. I've got just a couple comments, but let me see if my colleague has.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Thank you so much, Nabi. Good to see you 2 days in a row. I love the spirit infusing your language around partnership with cities and recognizing that in order to achieve your goals, Caltrain's goals, you've got to figure out what our needs are and where there's an overlap in priorities. I'm going to flip the question on you and ask, as you articulate the various things that comprise the city partnership toolkit, what do you see as what may not inherently align with our interests and priorities? Where will Caltrain be doing the most work to try to bring Palo Alto aboard?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lightfoot-Hames. I just want to make sure I repeat that back to you to ensure that I understood your question correctly. So you said what may not inherently align with the city's values, and how do we see Caltrain kind of being supportive of that?
I think what I'm saying is when you come together in partnership, it's a simple partnership and things just sort of magically happen if both parties' interests are completely aligned, and that is rarely the case. So in this instance, working with our city right now in this era where you all have various goals, I'm just wondering what you see as kind of the greater friction points with Palo Alto. And I would be super interested in what you might be interested in doing to try to smooth some of those friction points.
I see. Yeah, I mean, I think there's parking use of like the parking lot has been one that we've always talked about, and that's one that's going to require a little bit more, I think, just discussion between the city and Caltrain in terms of, how can we explore opportunities to, either bring in third-party vendors to help build and robust kind of mobility opportunity, including scooters, or just greater alignment with like, how are we utilizing that space? I mean, Caltrain, we really, see parking as, in terms of access hierarchy, like one of the lower levels, right? And so in terms of getting folks to the station, we want to meet in the middle. And I think that's been a topic that previously has had some friction. And naturally, we've been having more of that across the corridor, but see as a very key opportunity in aligning our partnership together through robust conversation. And I think if I may ad-lib a little bit more here, what I value is the public process in the city of Palo Alto, because everything is so diligently explored in terms of options on the table. And I think that really leads to transformative efforts that really push the envelope, right? So I think we've been really, even through the great separation efforts, challenged through these different scenarios and engagements that we've had, but it's only led to really great progression in advancement of concepts moving forward. And so I think in the same way, in that same spirit, there's a lot of opportunity to engage, not only in the parking, but just site activation as well. That requires a lot more partnership with our partner agencies, including VTA and Stanford and the city. So hopefully that answers your question, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to, and a lot of avenues that I think there's going to be a good alignment and consideration moving forward.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Speaking of kind of that station alignment, I'm aware that I probably have this wrong. Check my facts here. Stanford owns the land, leases it to us. We sublease it to VTA to run the station. Is that right?
That's all on the west side of the tracks, but Caltrain owns on the east side.
Even better.
Yeah.
So within that construct, Navi, I'd love to know, first of all, how typical is that sort of Byzantine or overlapping set of land rights structure? Are we unique? Are we normal in that regard? And regardless of how common it is, what is it like for Caltrain, particularly on the west side that is, owned and leased by a number of different entities? And what could we do differently to make things more smooth? When it ultimately comes to running the station, the user, the pedestrian, the scooter owner, the bike cyclist, the person riding the train, they don't know who has what rights. They just want it to look good, feel safe, feel coherent, connected, maybe even like a fun destination they want to be at. So I'm wondering what you would do to make that, to bring that station to where you'd want it to be, even though you don't have the ownership rights to it.
I think that's a great question. So to answer your first question about how unique are we, I think Palo Alto definitely has a unique dynamic because there's so many parties involved and engaged, a number of the ones that you listed. But similarly, we're seeing that even with San Francisco and the city of San Jose, and an active discussion was, Palo Alto truly functions as a metropolitan city, in likeness of how many modes of transportation are available and what you all are seeing there, and really because of the robust partnership, especially from a jurisdictional overlap perspective. But I think in terms of like what has our relationship been, we've been really, really fortunate through the Palo Alto Mobility Hub planning to be partnering with Jason Kim at BTA and several other members. I point him out because I can see him amidst the group that's on Zoom today, who will probably be following my update with his subsequent update. But we've been working really closely to talk about, what are those near-term milestones that we can reach to really bring change to the station? What are those more medium-term and then long-term station amenities that we'd like to see? I think now with electrification really building a more robust service and offering, as many as 2 trains per hour, we really want to make sure that as a main priority is that the channels of communication remain open between all of the partners, so that, if there's changes that we need to make where like a certain stop is, to make it a lot more seamless to get to the platform and for our riders to have a more comfortable and effortless experience, then those are kind of our near-term opportunities that we see, because right now, Councilmember Lightfoot-Hames, we're really focused on ridership and enhancing that just as we acclimate to this new service. And so I think what you'll hear a lot from Caltrain with respect to how we make that station more fitting for our riders in the community is really going to be focused on like making sure our service aligns with other service that is going to be available at that station, whether it's VTA or Stanford's Marguerite Shuttle or even Samtrans, right? So I think that's kind of our near-term goal. And then I'm happy, even in a follow-up conversation at the committee, to talk more and partner with many of those jurisdictions and owners about, what is that future plan and where Caltrain fits in.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Well, Julie, your question prompted me to think a little bit more about where those tensions might exist. And, we have this blessing of having a whole bunch of agencies really having a strong interest here. Stanford, the city, VTA, Caltrain, Samtrans, and AC Transit. 6 different agencies, and nobody who has real clear sense of ownership. And that's why I mentioned as council meeting, VTA has just agreed to set up a board ad hoc committee on the future of the intermodal station. And the intention is not for it to be a bunch of ETA decisions. It's to really pull together all those entities in a partnership, and where there are slightly different interests, to figure out how to reconcile them. And so one of the things that I think you might have been alluded to that we encountered very definitely in our Churchill and Meadow and Charleston grade crossings is essentially a tension between two different Caltrain policies that were adopted at different times and have not really been adequately reconciled and need to be updated. And that's a real estate policy that's intended to really optimize the real estate assets as a resource, and the grade crossing strategy, which, and even in this case, the station access policy to some degree, which wants to facilitate improved grade crossings, and that can run up against the narrow real estate interests. And we don't have a reconciliation of that in my mind yet at Caltrain, and that's a next thing that we really need to do this coming year. And then specifically at this station, we've run into some of these tensions, and they're really about land uses in the specific station area and the greater station area. And so these are both opportunities and challenges. As one of the entities may say, well, I want to build housing on my land there. And somebody else, well, we need to have that as be part of the whole circulation of this station and access. And that's why we really all need to come together and no longer be acting somewhat unilaterally. An example that we have right now at the station is what we call the Red Cross building behind MacArthur Park, which is almost 8,000 square foot building. It's an old single-story building, but it is the biggest structure in the station area, and it's been empty. Stanford has their own notions of just utilizing it for their purposes versus purposes that really help to activate and complement the uses of the station, I think are more in the interest of the other parties. So that's another example of things we need to work out. And then as Navi mentioned also, the value of the station access policy ties into things like we are just launching our downtown housing plan, and that will very much want to be integrated with this, in particular now that we have state law AB 2097 that prohibits cities from requiring parking within a half mile of a station. And so the value to the city, if we can't require parking, the value to the city of transit goes even higher. So those are all factors to go in there. And then in addition to the really important points Navi mentioned, I just want to reiterate the ones from last night that I mentioned on transit use for us, both in our downtown and more broadly, fulfills a whole bunch of our goals. Traffic reduction, parking demand reduction, not just the impacts of it, but the incredible cost of it. And then our environmental goals of both atmospheric pollution and greenhouse gas pollution. And so all those things are furthered by transit use. And so the station access policy is important to help that. I will add that my understanding from discussions at the Caltrain board is the access policy is not just getting to there, but it's actually circulation in the station. So we have this question, well, do we define the policy once you get into the station area boundaries, or is it everything getting to a train, getting on board a train? So it's not just access to the station, but access through the station, and including those who are passing through the station, like our bike plan, which goes to the last point, which is I had hoped that we would be able to bring our consultants for our bike and ped master plan here so that we'd have a discussion on the access policy and where we are in the development of the bike and ped plan, which is just still being formulated in a draft form, so that we could make sure that we're aligning these two goals, the Caltrain access policy and our own bike and ped plan. And Philip and I have talked about when this can go to the committee. My hope is that we aren't going to bring it after the consultants have arrived at their tentative conclusions, but further upstream so that we can have a kind of a check-in and inform those and influence their recommendations as opposed to having it. Yeah, Philip?
Sorry, you're referring to our bike and ped plan consultants?
Yes.
Yeah, so there is still time to provide input, and when they come here, they're still
They're
not
not going
gonna
to
have
have them next month rather than later.
they're not going to be available next month. They're available at the November meeting
They're not available because
that's when they're scheduled to go to the different committees. That's when it's scoped. That's when they'll have the materials prepared to bring here.
okay, and the materials are for our input or for our review of their outputs?
So they're planning to share with you where they're at with things, and the document's not completed yet, so I can't tell you what's in it. So they're working on the document, which will provide information, but it will also be seeking input. This is still another opportunity, which is why they're going not just to this committee, but to all the various committees that were scoped to get input, which would later go to the city council, which is not a final plan that would go to city council. This is another round of iterations and input.
And if I could just suggest that I think we're going to come back to this topic when we get to future meetings and agendas. So perhaps best to table that for the time being.
All right. And we can go ahead and break up to see if we have any public comments on each of these. Do we have anyone who wanted to speak on Caltrain? Okay.
Yeah, through the chair, we have one speaker.
Sure.
Hi, I hope you can hear me at this point. This is Steve Rosenblum.
Yes, Steve, we can hear you.
Thanks. Yeah, I spoke yesterday at the council meeting during the Caltrain thing, and I just wanted Navi to hear this again about what was alluded to, I think, indirectly by council members Burt and Lithcott-Hames, and that is that we need cooperation from Caltrain on the grade crossings, not just the stations. The grade crossings are important to the city in that we need to cross the tracks, not only to get on the trains at the stations, but also for our community to exist as a whole rather than an east half and a west half. So the tracks have divided Palo Alto since the beginning of the 20th century. And we now have an opportunity to do something about that. And we need Caltrain's help with their real estate rights and our real estate rights. They're in conflict on this issue, and we need to compromise. We can't just have Caltrain say it has to go this way, and it's our way or the highway. And that's where we need cooperation from Caltrain. We all agree about the stations and the station access, but the grade crossings are a different story, and I'm hoping that we can expect a more cooperative attitude from Caltrain on the real estate issues going forward. Thank you.
Okay, so we can move forward to VTA updates, I think, or do we have anything?
No, I was just going to note, as mentioned earlier, that we do have Jason Kim online.
Great.
There he is.
Welcome, Jason.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Kim. I'm a senior planner with VTA. I want to bring a brief update on the Palo Alto Mobility Hub Master Plan. Navi mentioned this during her comments earlier. We're working on a joint study between VTA, City of Palo Alto, Stanford, Samtrans, and Caltrain to look at essentially a long-term vision for the Palo Alto Transit Center area. We're actually touching on a lot of the discussion topics that was mentioned during Navi's update. And we're currently going through scoping. We've met as a group of all the agencies about 2 or 3 times right now. We're currently meeting monthly as we work on this scope development. Kind of what at a high level, the scope we're looking at is we'll be identifying kind of a problem statement or the problems at the station area, including, needs for all the transit providers, access to and out and through the station, as was just mentioned, and some infrastructure needs. We're going to be setting goals for all the different providers, understanding, kind of what space is needed, what needs are needed by all the different providers and agencies through the area. You will be using those items to develop sort of a design scope, and the whole goal is to put together some level of conceptual planning for the site to understand sort of a near and long-term vision for the site and what we want to do. We do have a lot of questions that we're still working through. This isn't an easy scope to put together. Really developing a scope through committees, a difficult process. And so we're kind of wrestling with understanding near versus long-term needs at the site and for all the different agencies in the area. Kind of what the project boundaries are in terms of both access and infrastructure needs. And then understanding what scope items we want to prioritize through the process. We do have identified $1 million in VTA Measure A funding for this project, but that money only goes so far when we're actually looking at a pretty extensive scope if we're trying to incorporate all the needs and desires of everyone at the site. So kind of our current plan is to keep working with this group to develop a scope, essentially put together a scope that gets sent out for an RFP. And then we bring on a consultant on board to really help us with the full study process, as well as outreach to Palo Alto residents for the actual site plan. A couple other things I want to note is this has actually been a really great effort. I think a lot of the transit providers and other agencies in the room, this is kind of noted, this is one of the first efforts where we've all really been together and discussing this kind of as a group. We've all kind of realized that this is a really great opportunity to put a lot more effort into planning for the Palo Alto area as well. So this has really been, even though we've only met 3 times so far, we've already been seeing a lot of fruit from these joint discussions. And we definitely are hoping to kind of keep this going through the process. I think with that, I'm happy to take any maybe questions or comments from the committee about the study process.
Well, thanks for that good update. One of the things that now that we have a VTA board committee that will be focused on this, the next step is to really align what's been going on at the staff level in the last month or so, to a couple months, I should say, several months, with what will be the role of the committee and how we move forward. So I do just want to make sure that we're thinking that it's a technical process, and I'm really pleased that the way Jason described it, we're now really looking at defining the problems, and then the boundaries of basically what we're going to tackle in this. And part of that is really it needs political and policymakers weighing in on that, as well as the technical experts. So we'll be looking forward to launching the committee role and aligning with that in the very near future.
Can I just add
Yeah.
a little bit? This comment is a little bit, it's of a different scope, but Jason, I think it's exciting that you've got this unwieldy, perhaps unprecedented committee tackling this massive thing, but you've already identified that it's actually really serving you and all of us, and that it's exciting. And when we ultimately think about, the long term, the complete upgrading, revitalization of whatever we would call the building itself, I hope that effort will be made to do some good storytelling about the various partners involved in the running of this particular multimodal center. I think it's important for the public to see these partnerships and, whether it's plaques or narratives written on the wall or, imagery or what have you. This is a place where so many different priorities intersect, and that's a demonstration of city cooperation and of progress. And so as a matter of art and design, a bit of history telling, I just hope that piece will not be overlooked as you think about all the ways to spend these important dollars. There are necessary things that of course you will do. And I would argue that telling this story well is a great way to ensure that you're helping teach others with this effort, and you're bringing the public along to really what we mean by public works and regional transportation. There's a lot that the public takes for granted about how systems work. Most people don't understand it. And so I think it behooves us. I think it serves us and ultimately allows us to win at the next thing and the thing after that if we do a good job of telling the stories of the hard work as we go.
Well, that makes me think about just emphasizing that once again, what are the problems and what are our goals? And one of them is to really make this station be a place that really enhances transit use and enhances the vitality and even the social aspect of our greater downtown area. And so part of that is moving beyond a pure utilitarian function, which is the backbone of what it will be. But what are the other elements that will really bring it into being a sense of place? And I know that from Stanford's comments, they've been very interested in bringing in, it's not from Center New Urbanism, who is it that they talk about? I forget. One of the leading kind of urban design consulting entities. I think it's a nonprofit to really help on the visioning part.
The Urban Land Institute?
Yes, Urban Land Institute. Thank you. And so we'll have both of those dimensions of how do we make it really functional, and how do we make it a place that functional from a utilitarian standpoint, and then functional from a more human standpoint. Yeah. Okay. And do we have any members of the public on this?
To the chair, at the moment, we do not.
Great. All right. So now we move on to city staff updates.
Thank you. The two quick things just to note that we continue to work with Caltrain and VTA on our cooperative agreement. I guess we can talk about that also in future meetings. And then the one other thing, just a reminder that the Caltrain electrification event is this Saturday from 2 to 6 p.m. here at the Palo Alto station.
And the cooperation agreement, can you give us a little more of an update on that? Because that's something that we were very focused on a few months ago, and we really haven't heard the updates on what's happening there.
Yeah, well, we're still working through with Caltrain on the scope, and Caltrain is going to be getting back to us with some updates and provide us more information on what they're scoping within the cooperative agreement.
And then we've been having, ever since Caltrain reviewed our conceptual designs, we've had a lot of back and forth and some progress on reconciling their technical standards and their real estate policy with what would be the least impactful designs, including impacts on properties. That was something that my understanding was we were still working on, and I've had discussions with Caltrain CEO about her getting personally involved in helping us resolve some of those issues. Are there any updates on that?
Good afternoon, Chair. But regarding the, so that is part of the cooperative agreement. That will be the initial phase of work, which would entail reviewing all the existing conceptual plans to understand the right of way and other issues and concerns that were listed by the council and rail committee to be reviewed earlier on before selection of the concept plan and come back to the rail committee and the council. So that will be the initial phase of the work, and that's being scoped in as part of that agreement. The part is that we could not spend the FRA and VTA money until we get this agreement approved. So that's the objective, to have this agreement approved so that they can come back and continue with that work.
Is there an anticipated date at which this agreement will be complete?
This, due to the complexity of the three-party agreement, which involves Caltrain review and approval, VTA review and approval, and the city's review and approval, all their legal have to be on the same page, and internally scope and work and cost, and it has to be aligned with FRA. So that is causing some additional times and complexities to complete this agreement. So we are hoping in early that it would go to TOPS committee in at the Caltrain in November and come back to the city council and the Caltrain board in the first week of December, early December.
And it sounds like we've got first the negotiations going on between our technical staff and Caltrain's technical staff, and then everybody else who gets involved, FRA and legal and the bodies. So are we almost there on the negotiations between our technical staffs, or is that still have a bunch of unresolved issues?
We are getting very close.
Okay, that's encouraging. Wanted to hear that one. All right. Thank you. Okay. I guess any members of the public on this item?
To the chair, no public comment at the moment.
All right. So then we can go to our special agenda item, which is not an action item, but one that we have a lot of substance to. So Philip, did you want to kick this off?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick this off if we could just pull up the slideshow and probably go ahead and skip on to slide 2. But really the purpose of this item is to provide an update on several near-term projects in the vicinity of Churchill Avenue rail crossing. The projects will enhance safety, improve traffic circulation, improve livability, and increase security. Next slide, please.
Can I just ask before you go any further, what is livability?
Livability. Yeah, so it's things like, in particular, like the Quiet Zone project. It's something that, improves people's lives, the noise impact. But we'll get to that as we get to the projects. But thank you for that question. So just to note, we've got several different projects here that are listed. And actually, I will say livability can be something that everybody interprets differently. So just to note that everybody might have a different interpretation. Could be traffic delays improves livability, safety, all that. Sorry, this is the list of all these projects. So we've got 3 city projects, 3 Caltrain projects. We have today with us project managers for these projects, city project managers. We have Shala Yazdi and Ruchika Agarwal joining Ripon and I. And also we have Caltrain staff here. And sorry to make things a little bit confusing, the next slide we're going to do is going to be slide 10 if you're following along at home, because Shala needs to get to another meeting. So we're going to skip ahead to the Churchill Avenue Enhanced Bikeway Project. And we've got Shala who's going to come up to the table and join us in this presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Burt, members of the Rail Committee. I'm Shali Yazdi, managing the Churchill Avenue Enhanced Bikeway Project. Brief background of the scope. The project consists of extending the existing bike path that currently ends at Castelleja Avenue on the Palo Alto School District frontage. So this project proposes to extend the bike lane and continues all the way up to El Camino and again to the Sanford Perimeter Trail. Also, we'll be adding high visibility crosswalks, and that's the ladder style like you see here at Castelleja and Madrono Avenue. We will be adding new lighting and curb improvements at Castelleja. That includes the updated RRFB as well at both intersections of Castelleja and Madrono. We will be repaving Churchill and restriping, adding more green bike lanes and just making it clear designation between the parking and the travel way. Landscaping and tree planting will be added along the school frontage. But just a side note, there are slides of these improvements in the future slides, so you'll see more of this. We will be removing the pork chop island and at El Camino and adding a right turn only storage lane from westbound Churchill to northbound El Camino Real. In addition, we will be adding enhanced bicycle and pedestrian crosswalks at the three crossings on El Camino Real. Can you, I'll just continue here. So this is the El Camino intersection, and you'll see that we have the red enhanced crosswalks. These are the thermoplastic stamped crosswalks similar to ones we have at Stanford Avenue and El Camino Real. We coordinated and procured the easements from the school district in order to build the bike path, which is on their property. And the project plans are currently in the procurement process. So we were hoping to start construction summer of 2025, and prior to that, we will be having public outreach to let people know of the upcoming construction activity. And over here, just a little brief explanation of the project. You'll see the right turn storage lane and also the enhanced green bike markings and sharrows that will be placed as part of the project. Next slide, please. And this section, we have Madrono, where we will have the enhanced crosswalk in addition to the RRFB. So I should make a note, the chevrons there should not be there. It is just a regular surface crosswalk at this location. Next slide, please. And that completes the Churchill Enhanced Bikeway update. Are we taking questions now or?
Yeah, I think maybe it might be good if we allow questions on this so that you can get out of here. But also, I just want to note that we have Holly Boyd also online from Public Works who can assist with questions that we might have about construction. This one, maybe less so, but maybe more so for the Section 130 project, Churchill and Alma, which is actually under construction currently.
Just one. Well, I'm excited. This has been a long time coming. At the Castelleja Avenue crossing, did you say will there be flashing pedestrian crossing triggers?
Yes, there are currently out there right now, but we will be updating them and to kind of go with the modified bulb outs at that location as well.
And for bikes, how will they be triggered?
We don't
Crossing
have,
Churchill.
so there is no bike, there's no special, I guess, lighting or signals for the bikes that need to cross Churchill.
So that's, I think, a real challenge. I take that route almost every day. And when you come, if you take the bike path from the tracks and hit the Castellea there, which is also the driveway into the that part of the Pally's parking.
Right.
Bikes then kind of go into a chaotic mode. Do they think of themselves as vehicles, as pedestrians? Do the cars think of themselves as vehicles or
Right.
pedestrians? And they look for a place and time to jump across. So not having a way that the bike crossing gets triggered for that flashing light, I think leaves that current problem in place.
So I should add that so we did look at bike, unfortunately, we are very limited with right of way at this location. We did look at adding bike crossings and boxes, but unfortunately, those are reserved for signal improvements. So bike boxes, we wouldn't put at this intersection, but they could get off their bikes or go on the sidewalk and do push the button. So they could use the same buttons that the pedestrians would.
And that's part of my concern. That won't happen routinely.
Right.
And so we basically aren't addressing the bike crossing. And at that location, I think there's probably a lot more bike crossing than pedestrian crossing. But what we've got is a solution to pedestrian crossing that's safe. But I'm not hearing of a solution to the bike crossing.
No. Well, yeah.
So
yeah.
I would really like to recommend that we look at that one remaining issue. And I think it's real and has been there a long time. I'll say that out of that whole area, that is what I've perceived to be the greatest hazard. And yet we're doing all this and I don't think we're addressing it.
We can take a look to see if we can add some striping. Not sure how we can look into this.
Yeah.
And I mean, we are in
if
the
there's a way
procurement
that
phase.
the bikes go into that off the path and then are basically queued up at that driveway and have a sensor trigger, then that triggers the flashing light, that
Right.
might be a solution. So we can't engineer it here,
Right.
but let's just say that it remains a real problem, I think.
Okay. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. Anyone from the public who want to speak on just this?
No comments at the moment.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we can skip back up to, what is it, slide 4, I think, if we can. And then we have Ruchika Agarwal, who's going to present on the Churchill Avenue, Alma Street crossing safety improvements.
I should have added one thing, which is we're planning still to put the seal bike and ped underpass, which would greatly increase the bike traffic at that location and further compound this issue. So thanks.
Thank you, Philip. Good afternoon, Chair Bird and members of the Rail Committee. My name is Ruchika Agarwal. I'm with the Office of Transportation as a project engineer. I'm managing the design of Churchill Avenue, Alma Street crossing. This is a at-grade railway crossing that was identified for safety improvements by the Section 130 program. Section 130 is a federally funded program, and it is administered by the State Department of Transportation, which is Caltrans. This is a joint project between the city of Palo Alto and Caltrain, since they operate the railroads and they have the right of way around the train tracks. The funding agreement and the funding is monitored and administered by the State Department, which is Caltrans. During the kickoff and the diagnostic meeting, there were elements that were defined to improve the safety for pedestrians and vehicles and bikes for this particular crossing. Some of the scope that we are currently working on, it's an installation of a pre-signal. A pre-signal is a signal an additional signal, an added signal in advance of an existing signal. So for in this case, for traffic traveling on Churchill Avenue in the eastbound direction, there will be an additional signal, which would give them an opportunity to stop before the tracks. And then the idea is, or the goal is, not the goal, the design is to coordinate the two signals so they are coordinated. Prior to this pre-signal, there was a green phase that was allocated for this direction of traffic for a few seconds before a train arrives when we receive the preemption to clear the tracks. Even with that, FRA and during the diagnostic meeting, it was shown, or it was proven, that we needed additional safety measures to completely avoid any chances of any vehicles or bikes or pedestrians to get trapped within these railway tracks. So that is kind of the purpose and the reason for installing an additional signal, which is kind of referred as a pre-signal in this project. In addition to that, we have other scope for improvements of pedestrians, bigger and wider queuing areas, improved lane crossings, high visibility crosswalks, advanced stop bars, and improved signal detection cameras for the entire intersection. Next slide, please. So we had, in 2021, we took this project to the City Council and we completed the design. In 2022, we've completed the process required to complete the General Order 88 forms and release the documents for construction in early 2023. In June of 2023 is when the City Council approved the contract with O'Grady Paving for the completion of the construction of this project. I should mention that since this is a joint project, the improvements are designed by the city and implemented for areas that are within the city's right-of-way. And in parallel, Caltrain is working on improving the gates and the other elements that are within their right-of-way. So this is kind of in collaboration, and we are coordinating together the two agencies as we are under construction right now. The construction amount is 2.2 million, a little more than 2.2 million, and it is under construction as we speak. Next slide, please. So yeah, we kicked off the construction in about fall of 2023. We mailed the notices, and since then there has been work happening in this intersection. I'm sure if you've traveled along this area, you've seen a lot of construction activity since then. Next slide, please. And again, as of last month, we completed the city completed the concrete work on the north side of the tracks. The demolition and the reconstruction happened. We worked very hard to try to avoid this beginning of the school year, but there were quite a few delays that were outside of the scope of the city and Caltrain. So that kind of pushed out our construction by a few months. Next slide, please. So again, all the construction activity that is happening is not only just the city's construction. Caltrain is working in parallel with the city at this particular intersection. They've done Caltrain, the track panel upgrade, the asphalt ramp conforms, the installation of the railing, the pedestrian gates, and truncated domes. And city has worked on relocating some of the utilities, the curb and the gutter at the crossing, all asphalt conforms, and the signal foundations have been in place. At this point, the construction is being managed by the city's Public Works Department, and I know Holly Boyd, Assistant Director, is also online to answer any questions about construction or any questions about design. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Julie?
Thank you for this update on this complex project. Excuse me. I know we've raised before the fact that this seems to be an intersection that is unfortunately very misleading for drivers at night, particularly with Waze and, you know, MapQuest, whatever the technologies are people are using to get around at night. People are being directed onto the tracks. Okay, I just want to say I was doing a ride along with our police officers with one of them when I was a new council member. I happened to be near that intersection one night when that happened. And the panic I experienced being a passenger in a police vehicle, having no role to play, obviously, but watching him handle the alert, knowing that at some point a train could come, and just watching this car like slowly creeping down the tracks and then somebody get out and the woman is panicking and, you know, it was quite a thing. So I look forward to hearing the update on that. Okay.
So that's what was explained that within the Caltrain right away, Caltrain also has one. And what we're going to hear out of these presentations is not only the value of each of these, but then begin our discussion on how they really come together as a suite of things and what are the aggregate benefits that we get. We've been kind of looking at them discretely, and they really and they all came forward discreetly because there were a bunch of problems here. But in the end, we now have a package that is really moving us forward on this. So, yeah. One thing I wasn't clear, and if we can pull slide 4, that's as close as we have of a graphic on the slide deck. There's so much that's gone on into this that I couldn't really discern. For bikers going eastbound, is there additional queuing for all the gazillion Pali bikers that line up there when school gets out?
So unfortunately not. We don't have additional bike parks, but what is a part of the project is if you see the continuation of the green bike lane through the intersection. So to make it safer, we do have the green bike lane all the way until the first signal and then continuation through the intersection. A right of way was a constraint here, so we could not have.
I was wondering that, and it doesn't sound like it's something we can address right now. But I'm aware that that's one of the biggest problems here. Is they get out, and if they can't queue there, they will cross from the wrong side, which is what hundreds do now. I mean, it's an army of kids who cross eastbound from the wrong side, in part because they're all trying to cross the tracks at the same time. We don't have a box that really allows them to cross over to the south side of Churchill and then proceed eastbound on Churchill. They come from both directions. It's chaos. It's a Monte Carlo start times 10. And that goes into part of what we were discussing earlier. I don't know that we've ever approached Caltrain about when we've had right-of-way intrusions with our grade crossings and the things we're negotiating that we talked about. We're really talking about intruding in the east and west boundaries of the Caltrain corridor, but not north and south. And this seems like this would be a place where we'd want to pursue just a little bit of access southbound that would allow greater pedestrian, really bike crossing in mass, because unfortunately kids get out of school at the same time. And so maybe we need to put that on the agenda for even our grade crossing discussions. When we've had those, we're in those negotiations with Caltrain, it's been about grade separations, but less so about these other measures that we're looking at. And maybe there's a solution that can be negotiated. Unfortunately, we're going to have a whole bunch of improvements from this package, and then maybe this has to be in a subsequent one. Yeah. Okay, any members of the public who want to speak on this part?
No public comment at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I know I should have asked a question. It's one of the things Philip and I were talking about before the meeting. Is we have in the, like right here, we have the first three bullets on project scope includes. And those are a bunch of signal optimizations. But what will be the benefits of those? Those are kind of technical things that we're going to do, but presumably we're going to get a range of benefits from those. So can you explain to us what we'll get as the outcomes there? And I think on the pedestrian cyclist improvements, it's pretty evident what it's safety and capacity improvements on there. But what happens? What are we going to get out of those signal improvements?
Sure, but the signal improvements primarily include safety elements. So the pre-signal provides ability for and clarity for vehicular traffic to stop before the tracks and give a prior full signal and controls to make sure that they have a stop bar and red light and green light before the tracks, which currently we don't have. So that's where that pre-signal does, and it makes sure that that is coordinated through the preemption controls with the gate arm mechanism to ensure that those signal timings can come on before. The new traffic signals at the intersections provide for the updates like pedestrian push buttons, as well as bike lane striping and other things that coordinated through the traffic signals. So those are the improvements associated with the traffic signals. The new signal that the 12-inch balls, probably they were 8-inch, that does not comply with the current guidelines from the MUTCD. So there are more upgrades to the traffic signal that were part of the project. And finally, the signal timing modifications that were required as part of the safety project were the preemption timing that Ruchika touched upon, which includes making sure that the pedestrians and bicyclists have adequate moment time before the signal gets cut off, so that they are not previously in our MUTCD as well as in state codes, there were allowance for the cutoff for before the train comes, and now there are requirements to have them go through at least through the second or last lane. So those kind of improvements create some more safety for pedestrians and bicyclists that are crossing Elmo Street, and that required some additional preemption signal timing that required Caltrains to adjust their detection and systems. So a small, sometimes things could cause a lot of, could create a lot of improvements that are required to make sure that those things can operate safely.
And in our next presentation, we may get some other updates when we hear on the Caltrain part of the same intersection complex, and both about safety improvements and to what extent we get near-term capacity improvements, and then what might be on the horizon.
And just one final closing note on this one. This project was actually identified by Caltrain and CPUC and through a diagnostic team, but this project specifically, we keep calling it colloquially the Section 130 project because it was identified through this hazard elimination program. That's really what the funding program is for. And so this is really a safety project. That's the main purpose of every single different thing that happens here, is really safety.
And I know that Mike can maybe touch on just how high in incidents this intersection is, and just a few intersections or crossings in the corridor are just disproportionately our greatest safety concerns at Caltrain. So great. Okay, we ready for?
I think the next slide is on the quiet zone, and I can touch upon it or have Caltrain come back. I can come back after Caltrain, however Chair prefers.
Why don't you go ahead just in sequence?
All right, thank you, Chair. So the quiet zone project, as Rail Committee has been, we have introduced and shared with the committee. So last slide, please. The next slide, please. Next slide. Next. This is it. So we did bring a report to the rail committee at the August rail committee meeting, giving update on the quiet zone study for Churchill Meadow and Charleston Drive. We are now working on developing the preliminary concept plans and planning to conduct a diagnostic meeting. We are outreaching FRA, CPUC, and Caltrain and hoping to have the meeting shortly. It's very hard to coordinate a meeting with those three entities. Finding a date because it's a physical in-person meeting at the site. So we are having some challenges with coordinating that meeting, but we will get to that and we'll share our preliminary concept plans for the improvements that were discussed, and kind of a guidance was also provided by the rail committee at the last meeting. So getting to that. And following that, we will do refine our concept plans based on the diagnostic meetings, also seek some additional outreach to our community, and then bring back a report to the rail committee for either a approval or review for the concept plan that we can then adopt as through the city council for an improvement project. And establishing the quiet zone. I have a quick update on Palo Alto Avenue project also, that the concepts that have been prepared, we have 100% plans that are prepared and submitted to Caltrain just more recently last week only. So we are hoping that they would give a quick review as well as concurrence to our GO88, which we will be then submitting to CPUC for their approval to initiate the construction. So in regards to some of the costs that were discussed at our August council meeting, I know our consultant at that meeting may have misspoken and said $200,000 for the quad gate improvements. I'd just like to share that for Menlo Park, more recently in 2023, the cost estimates were between $2 to $2.5 million, the construction cost estimates only. So the project cost estimates typically maybe another 20-30% for design and encroachment permits and other costs, construction management costs. However, noting that some of these improvements as part of the safety improvements will be installed, so there could be some, a lower number than that, but I certainly anticipate between $1.5 to $2.5 million in 2024 dollars. That would be the estimates for the quad gate systems. We also researched the cost for the wayside horns from various entities. There are very limited installations in California. There was one in Escalon and more in Oregon and Texas. And it's anticipated that the cost for single installation is about $500,000 to $800,000 for the project cost. So the timelines for those implementations typically require similar kind of process. So they are like for quad gate, we have seen about 4 to 5 year timelines for all the approvals, installation, design, and construction. If funding is all in place, and the wayside horns have maybe a little less timelines, but it has to go through the similar process, and therefore, even though the project cost and scope is less, but because of the approval requirements as well as concurrence from railroad and the CPUC are required, the timeline may be a little less, maybe 2 to 3 years versus 4 to 5 years for that. So just a high level update on those costs and timelines as requested by the rail committee, but we are pursuing as recommended by rail committee on both aspects as we develop the concept plans. That
Thanks.
Quite so.
Well, that's interesting on how much time even for the wayside horns. As you probably know, at our last rail committee meeting, that was brought up. Really, one of the members of the public came forward with some very interesting data. And it actually created additional interest at Caltrain throughout the corridor. for this as an alternative, in part because Caltrain has apprehensions about quiet zones not being as safe. They're environmentally better, but when we talk about quad gates for quiet zones, that's what is a necessary component to meet FRA standards. But that's not the problem we have at this intersection. We don't have people driving around gates like you do out in the countryside, and a quad gate matters, but that's an FRA standard. So we have, how do you check the boxes and meet the rules versus what are the problems you're trying to solve and how do you solve them in a real world way? So I'm glad you mentioned the wayside horns, because I was looking for it in the packet and couldn't find that reference. I will say that also after one of the things we talked about was, we had essentially sound heat maps that we saw, but there's a question of, are there impacts for the most immediate neighbors? And one of the things I realized is that they can be fairly directional, and we have all of the Pali area that is kind of open space that is not people sleeping and things. And then this question of whether you can attenuate the sound through different measures. And I've come to appreciate that that's very possibly something that can complement the horns as we would go forward with considering that. It's an interesting. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to add some of these examples that we have looked for the wayside horns are not on a commuter train thing that most of the time local cities have partners with. It's more like on SCNF or Union Pacific Railroad, which are sometimes take longer to coordinate. So some of these estimates are based on the timelines, the cost estimates are based on.
Didn't San Clemente put them in?
We did not see that in our research, but maybe we can certainly look into it.
Okay. And I know Mike actually has some experience with waysides that he may share with us a little bit. All righty.
Can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
you bet.
So we got an email, or at least I did, from a member of the public expressing some concern about whether Caltrain will have to continue to blow its horns even with quad gates. I just want to read the concern that was expressed. I am told, he's referencing other people, I am told by these other people that even with quad gates, Caltrain will continue to blow horns whenever a train bypasses California Avenue. I just experienced that when I took the Baby Bullet up to SF yesterday, and it blew its horn at every bypassed station. So much for quiet zones with quad gates. Please ask about this with Caltrain reps.
Well, first, that's a different location from where there would be quad gates. So it sounds like the question is at stations, not at grade crossings, is there a need to still blow horns?
I did find the question confusing. It feels like it does conflate those two issues, but this is somebody that speaks regularly on rail issues, so I feel like they're an informed member of the public. I just wanted to repeat it verbatim and see if anyone else could make clearer sense of it.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Hi, thank you for the question. My name is Mike Meter. I'm the Chief Safety Officer at Caltrain. So the quiet zones, if it is in fact an approved quiet zone, typically the train horn wouldn't be blown. Now, the engineer has that option if he sees perhaps an unsafe situation, sees someone near the tracks, they can certainly still sound the horn at a grade crossing. If it's a quiet zone, they typically wouldn't do that. At stations, it's a different story. They are required to blow the horns coming into stations. So you're going to have some situations here where you've got a grade crossing right next to a station. And so you might hear some of the horns then.
But at the Cal Lab, we really don't have that. It does beg a question I hadn't thought about, which is whether the station horn issue would also be a candidate for wayside horns.
Yep.
Yeah.
It may be. I mean, the wayside horns is something we can explore. Ripon was right. Did you see a lot of that on the class ones? I do have some experience coming from Denver with some wayside type horns, directional as well as directional bells, when the communities had some concerns about that. So I can certainly address some of that if you have other questions.
And as we touched on last meeting, the horns don't just blast at the intersection. They come on how many seconds beforehand?
At least 15 seconds
Yeah,
prior.
and so, it can be a quarter to a half mile upstream,
Right.
and then they continue blasting downstream, basically.
Right.
And that's one of the big benefits of wayside horns, is just that location. And you can maybe control the direction of the sound to some degree.
And the Doppler effect. So you have the sound is coming from a moving thing, right? So you get this whole versus Wayside. We all got very excited about Wayside and Quad Gates in the August meeting. All of a sudden, it felt like maybe there was a completely different way to think about, moving the train through the city without being so disruptive in the ways that we're concerned about, and vis-a-vis grade separation. And maybe this is a shorter term, near term solution, more affordable, quicker, we thought, as we continue to work out the grade separation options. And as we see Caltrain ridership lower, which gives us more time to figure that out. So we had this degree of excitement about, the Quad Gates and the Wayside horns. I think what this email, however complicated or it was combining a couple different issues. We want to be sure that we're not jumping on a solution, solving one problem and creating another, right?
Yeah, I don't think that doesn't sound to be the case there. Not creating another, we'd solve one problem and there would be an additional remaining problem that was unsolved.
I guess what I mean is if we create the impression in the public that we have solved a problem and we know that there's sort of a part B of the problem, we want to be super clear that
Yeah,
we're
but
not
that's not- that's-
promising, we don't want to promise quiet, like we've got quiet zones
Got it.
and now the trains aren't making noise. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, but
Yeah.
it doesn't create another problem, but it may create a false impression that we've solved a bigger problem than we have. And one of the things Mike, correct me if this is not the case, is Caltrain, our staff had alluded to that Ripon had talked about needing to go to CPUC and their approvals for this. But is Caltrain considering looking at a corridor wide approach from CPUC so that we wouldn't have to, all the cities do these as one-offs? Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, we are looking at that way. So I'll talk about some of the more problematic crossings. And so we're going to present this strategy and address it with the CPUC across the alignment.
And I'll add that there will be economy of scale then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And presumably that would apply to stations as well?
It could certainly. We'll cross that bridge as well.
Okay.
Yes.
That's almost what I was hoping to hear, but that could or will. We'll work on that. Okay, great.
This is probably a great segue for us to get back on track on slide 13 and hand it over to Mike for the Caltrain projects.
Right.
So to the chair, we have two speakers.
Great.
Yeah. So our first speaker is John M.
That's me. You want to come to the mic or no?
Yes, please.
Well, thrilled for your work. All of you. Hi, I'm John M. And I'm thrilled for your work. Particularly, I'm excited about the quiet zone so I can get some sleep. For decades, Caltrain has been very, very noisy neighbor. And in the name of safety, but with a 50-year-old philosophy of blowing horns from 5 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock in the morning, 100 times a day, it's difficult to appreciate Caltrain's public service. So we're excited about the prospect of implementing quiet zones. We're glad it's on the agenda at long last. I'm here to thank all of you and encourage you to move it up the agenda as quickly as possible. I recognize it's difficult. There's safety concerns and so forth, but we're looking forward to Caltrain also assisting the city with this and making it easy for the city to establish a quiet zone rather than fighting them each step of the way, saying it's our territory, stay off it. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Our second speaker is Melinda M.
Hello, again, about the quiet zones. I'm very perplexed because I drove by the Atherton quiet zone, which was established in June of 2016, which is 8 years ago. Why we are at sort of ground zero on the quiet zones for Palo Alto, and an increase of cost from the meeting that we were at before of projected costs of 10 times and 4 to 5 years. So I hope I'll live that long. But I just find the idea of it costing $2.5 million to install quad gates, I just wonder how much of that cost is for consultant fees. And I just find this unfathomable that here we are 8 years after Atherton that we're starting this conversation. So again, I'm inviting you for coffee at my house so you can see and hear what it's like. I mean, it's a health issue, and the Alma freeway outside of our door is also a health issue. So maybe Caltrain will get on board and kind of work with the people who are suffering for this for decades, including my neighbors who have young kids and don't have double pane windows, and their kids are assaulted with noise, health hazards 100+ times a day. So anyway, hopefully this can be moved along at a price that makes sense. And how did Atherton do this 8 years ago? Does anyone know? Can anyone fill me in on that? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I just at a high level, I know that Atherton, that was a multi-year project. They led the way on the corridor, and now we and Menlo Park are the next cities that are pursuing it. Are there any other cities that are pursuing quiet zones yet?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so while Atherton led the way, we're among the next leading set of cities on it. So I understand that folks who wish it could have been done yesterday have that wish, but what we are addressing now is how we can move forward with the right design and the right features in the time frame that as short as possible. I just wanted to revisit that time frame. Well, first I wanted to say also on the cost, Ripon, what you provided as an update is consistent with what you and others had provided us many months before. For whatever reason, the consultant made a misstatement last meeting, but those are the numbers we've heard throughout. Those are numbers consistent with what other cities have had, combined with the escalation in costs on civil engineering jobs that are presumably making it even more expensive. But the surprise was last month and didn't make sense. This isn't a surprise to me.
And just to further note, we still don't have cost estimates.
Right.
So the cost estimates will be coming, but yeah, then we'll have a better refined estimate.
And I did want to I'm sure we can't resolve it today, but the time frame for this, when we had our initial presentations on this, first at Palo Alto Avenue and then talking about at the other crossings, I didn't think we were talking about this long of a time horizon. we can't resolve that today, but I'm going to be very interested in how we can accelerate that. Julie, anything on that? Okay, so I guess now we're to Caltrain's project at the same location.
That's right.
There's a pattern here. It's all about Churchill.
All right. Thank you, Chair Burt and members of the Rail Committee. I am Mike Meter. I'm the Chief Safety Officer at Caltrain, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about some of the safety improvements that we are exploring corridor-wide. As the Chair Burt said, you know, when I first arrived here and I heard we had a corridor crossing strategy, I was very interested in seeing what that was. And then what I found was it was synonymous to grade separations. And of course, grade separations, you know, they say that the safest crossing is no crossing at all. And so grade separations are certainly a great solution, but they are, it does take some time planning. They're very costly, as we have found recently, much more costly than we thought. And there are some other improvements that you can make to address specific problems. So as we've collected data over the course of the last year to 18 months, we've learned some things about some of the crossing, and it's helped us prioritize where we see those highest risk crossings. And so we're putting together a corridor-wide grade crossing strategy of other improvements we can make in a more timely fashion at a much less cost that I believe will have significant impact on the safety at the crossings. And I wanted to share some of those with you. Next slide, please. So this is some of the data that was referenced. One of the things that we noted as we started collecting data, vehicle track incursions are a problem here on Caltrain and Caltrain alignment. Just about every week we have a vehicle on the tracks somewhere. Some of these vehicles manage to get themselves off the tracks, others don't, and so we have to help them and have those vehicles removed. So as the ones that we certainly know about and where we've removed vehicles, you can see here, these are the top 6. There were 5. Sunnyvale, for whatever reason, has moved into the top here, Sunnyvale Avenue, and we're investigating some of the causes there. But conspicuously, Churchill Avenue here in Palo Alto is the highest number of vehicle incursions onto the tracks, vehicles getting stuck on the tracks. When we talk to folks about that, how did you end up getting on the tracks? You're right, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. The answer oftentimes is the GPS told me to turn here. So without having a real clear understanding of what the actual road edge is, people will just kind of follow the directions and they turn when what looks like a road. Next slide, please. So we've looked at a number of things to help kind of really kind of help indicate where that road surface is, where the lanes are. Some of these are listed here, and I'll show you kind of what I mean by all of these. Pavement markings is one of the things. Now there's a lot of markings, keep clear. There's stop lines. There's things like that are on the road. There's solar lane markers is something we're looking at too. I have one of these right here. We call them turtles. They're just basically glued to the side of the road. They reflect, light up when a car so they can kind of see what the side of the road looks like. We're looking at delineators, or bollards might be another term, and I'll show you what those are again to kind of help with that. Signage, additional signage, and I'll explain that. Lighting, more directional type lighting, things that won't bother the neighborhoods, create that light pollution, but also light up the intersection a little bit better too. So we're exploring that. And then of course, there's all the improvements that we've already talked about on the grade crossings for better wayfinding, signal improvements, those kinds of things, as well as grade separations. Next slide, please. So from a pavement markings perspective, this is something that we're proposing, and we are going through the full GO88 process on this. Basically painting the dynamic envelope and the area around the crossing red. It's a reflective red in color. It helps really denote, hey, here's the tracks. These are the areas you should stay off of. Stop before this area. These are tracks. Make sure you get out of the red area before you make any turns and whatnot. We can still have the same markings, the hash marks, The bike lanes can be denoted on top of this as well, so everyone can clearly see where vehicles belong, pedestrians belong, and bikes belong. But it calls a much bigger attention to that area where the tracks are. And that shows, of course, Churchill on the left. And then, okay, next slide, please. Okay, this one's a little bit in a different order than I was expecting. If we can kind of go to the next, we'll come back to this one when we talk about fencing. Here's some examples of some of the grade crossing safety enhancements. I showed you the solar markers here. You can see how that illuminates the roadway. The signage, most of these, or all of these are MUTCD approved signage. It's really more geometry of the crossing. One of the other crossings is a Broadway crossing in Burlingame, which if you've ever driven across that, it's pretty surprising that we don't have more problems there. But just signifying the geometry of the crossing. So you can see as cars cross and are intending to turn onto Alma, there's tracks before Alma. So that's going to help some too. And the placement of this signage is important. The bollards are below that from the signs. These are flexible bollards. They're on springs, basically. If vehicles do hit them, they just kind of fold down and they flop back up afterwards. They're plastic, but they are very reflective. This is just something, again, it's a little higher, noting where the road edge is, and it helps with delineating the lanes. So where should cars be? Where should bikes be? Where should pedestrians be as well? And then you can see some of the lights, the shielded lights or directional lights that we're also exploring. Again, it eliminates some of that pollution of the light going into the neighbors and really lights up the area in the crossing. Next slide, please. So those are some of the. I think there's another slide. Go to the next slide. These got out of order. Here we go. We'll come back to those fencing slides. I'm not sure how that happened, but we probably gave them to you in the wrong order. We're also exploring technologies. So the CCTV is one. I know that Palo Alto has a number of cameras there at Churchill Crossing, and we appreciate you sharing information with us, but we are looking at replacing our just enterprise CCTV system. We don't have any cameras at any grade crossings, very limited in terms of stations and those kinds of things. And we're putting together a policy where we will eventually have CCTV at all of the crossings, at stations, along the alignment of some other troublesome areas we've identified as high-risk areas. Along with that is video analytics, so things that can help us detect people who are in areas they shouldn't be in, any kind of proximity type of intrusion or something like that. A lot of the analytics, they're getting better. They still have some limitations, but they're getting better. Intrusion, rail sentry, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that rail sentry here in just a second. And then the last one is the GPS apps. So we have been diligently working with our partners over at Google and Waze. We've reached out to Apple. They haven't been quite as responsive, but we're going to continue to reach out to Apple. Google and Waze, however, have just been fantastic partners, and they understand the issues that we've had. Waze is a little bit ahead of them in terms of denoting all of the railroad tracks. If you use Waze, you'll see them kind of flash when you approach those, but there wasn't anything in the instructions, and that's really what people are listening to. Google is working with us to actually add them, Google and Waze. So that's just kind of a preview. I don't want to take away their thunder. They've been fantastic partners, but eventually here in the very near future, you're going to hear language in the navigation, verbal instructions that basically say, cross the railroad tracks, then make your first left turn onto Alma or whatever that is. And we really believe that's going to help eliminate some of that. So we appreciate their partnership. Next slide.
I'm going to jump in and say, this is fabulous, because in contrast to the social media platforms who would say, we just provide the channel, we're not responsible for what users do. Google and Waze are actually saying, we're interested in the safety of our users. We're not going to let them make a dumb mistake.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. They understand the benefit for public safety and they're right on board. So again, kudos to them. Rail Sentry. This is a technology we have installed right now at the Broadway crossing in Burlingame, and we were waiting here at Churchill while some of this other work was being done. And it's a system of CCTV and LiDAR that's used to basically analyze movement behaviors. There's a component of artificial intelligence to this, so they can really get a sense of how cars and vehicles or how pedestrians, bicyclists move through the intersection. And what it does is it helps us understand basically how long should somebody be in one of these zones if they're just doing what they're supposed to do, crossing the intersection. So you can set up different geofenced areas. You can see the red, for example, on either side of the crossing and onto the tracks, onto the alignment. There shouldn't be anyone in those spaces. So if we see somebody in this space, the system will alert us immediately. It alerts our dispatch. So we know someone is perhaps walking down the alignment, and we can immediately let trains know. So trains stop in those areas, and we can dispatch folks out there to address whatever that situation is. The system does delineate really well between people and raccoons and bikes and all of those kinds of things. And then, of course, in the crossing itself. So each of those areas, we can set different timeframes based upon the behaviors and get notifications. Technically speaking, it can be incorporated into the positive train control. Of course, we want to test this and make sure we have this zeroed in pretty well so we don't stop trains all the time when we don't need to stop trains. But that's the future of this type of technology. Next slide. Oh, and I'm sorry. And can you go back a few slides? I wanted to talk about the fencing project. So there we go. Basically, the fencing, we are continuing to look at that along our entire alignment, general fencing repairs to try to close off areas where people might be able to access the alignment and areas they shouldn't. We want them to cross at the crossings, obviously. And this was an area identified. There was a grant, of money given to address this particular project. It basically is the fencing that exists now, that 5-foot, 6-foot fence that exists from Churchill Avenue all the way to Palo Alto Station along the bike path there. We're going to be removing that fence, and we're going to be replacing it with a 9.5-foot anti-climb fence with a winglet at the top of the fence. If you'll go back to that map now, I'll kind of give you a visual. So we've got the map on the bottom there. You can see basically where Churchill is. It's just south of the football field there. The green line denotes where the existing fence is and where we're going to be removing and replacing it. And it continues up north, up to the top. Really with the funding that we have, we see that fence ending just south of the station. So it doesn't quite go all the way to the station, about 1,000 feet of fence short of the station. And we're working very closely, as Navi said, with the city to see what we can do to partner to get that fence all the way to the station so that we'll have that 9.5-foot fence all the way to the station. We'll also be replacing rolling gates, 2 rolling gates, one there at the Stanford station, which is a little bit of a problematic gate. It allows access pretty easily. This new rolling gate will be more secure there. And then there's another gate south of the station that provides access to the alignment. We'll also be replacing the gate there. We are in the process of the procurement process for this. And as soon as we go through that process, we'll be able to start to work replacing the fence here. And as I said, it's really important. I've heard from the city a couple of times about areas where they've seen maybe gaps in the fence, holes in the fence. We appreciate that partnership, and we repair those just as quickly as we possibly can all along the right of way. So that's a little quick update on the fencing project as well, and pretty high level on some of the grade crossing improvements. I'm happy to take any questions that you have now.
I'm just going to start by saying your reputation precedes you. I've heard such great things about you from Pat. Delighted to have such a great partner in safety with Caltrain. So it's nice to meet you in person. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And one of the things that you focused today on these Palo Alto measures, but I just wanted to bring up that kind of an important development at Caltrain in recent months, as Caltrain over the last 15 years has been, dozen years, I guess maybe, making steady progress on improving the safety and the security of the corridor. And certainly grade separations are this fail-safe or near fail-safe approach. But the costs are just going through the roof, and other circumstances have changed too in terms of how much capacity demand is there really. So in the last couple months, our CEO has committed to a comprehensive corridor-wide program of adopting best practices throughout the corridor on safety and security. And that is a really monumental shift in a Caltrain goal. It first has to go through really a process of defining what that is, which a lot of what we've touched on in Palo Alto is basically the framework for that, although even what Mike talked about on station security and how do you address that, which is different from grade crossings. And then figuring out what it would cost, finding the funding, and then proceeding on the implementation. So this is a big project, but compared to the cost of a single grade separation, and you look at the value of this throughout the whole corridor, and it's quite high. And so I think this is really exciting that this is now the direction that Caltrain is taking. It's going to take a while. But it's moving forward, and it's really a positive development. So, and then, Mike, I appreciated your emphasis on the LED lighting, which LED is one of its shortcomings is it's directional, and one of its benefits is its direction. And so you can focus the lighting, you can have low wattage lighting, multiple lights, and basically avoid spillover lighting and get the lighting where you need it at the right volume of light. It is kind of, we all scratch our heads on the drivers that turn down the tracks. I mean, if I had a Google map that said jump over this cliff, I wouldn't do it. But somehow we have this problem. And it looks like these measures should go the vast majority of the distance in addressing that. And if we find that we need anything else, I'm sure we'll look at how to adjust it. But it certainly looks like it's a comprehensive set. And as Mike has explained it at our Caltrain board meetings, what we're doing at Churchill is a best practice model that we'll be looking at then doing at the other high risk crossings in the corridor. Yep. And so we're doing it here because it has exceptionally high collision data. Good news is we're first in line. So I didn't know if you had something else to add to that, Mike.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it's all risk-based. So we're taking a look at all the crossings and stations and all of those kinds of things and ranking priority of the risks that we see. And that's how we intend to go about addressing these things.
Great. Any public comments?
Yeah, through the chair, we have one speaker.
Great.
Our speaker is Stephen R.
Hi, Steve Rosenblum here again. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak. I was really intrigued by the Mike's introduction of Rail Sentry. I think this is something I've been waiting to hear about, particularly about suicide prevention. As we're all pretty well aware, you can put fences, 100 feet high along the right of way, and those grade level crossings are still open to somebody just walking onto the tracks. And I think I'm hoping that this Rail Sentry provides a solution to that problem, because I can see this as a continuing problem at our three grade crossings at Churchill Meadow and Charleston. So I'm hoping that the testing at Broadway works out well, and that Caltrain can have the funding to roll this out at other intersections where there have been problems of suicide and suicide attempts. Thank you.
That concludes our speakers.
Yeah, well, I'll just add that Palo Alto led the way in 2015 and 2016 with a set of automated and sensors and intrusion detection responses. And I think of this Rail Sentry as Gen 2 of this. And it's really exciting that, we have been aware of all the advancements in sensor technology and in LiDAR and AI, and seeing them applied to this circumstance is really a positive development. Okay, where does that take us?
I think you received this report, although no actions needed, and we can discuss future meetings.
Okay, as a wrap up to these and kind of a follow up to our last meeting, we were really kind of having and part of why we had this set of presentations was to put together not only for the public and our council that we have a set of projects at Churchill that together are really coming together as a package. First of all, to improve safety for bikes, safety and security for bikes, for cars, for pedestrians, all of those. And then it ties into what we were in the last meeting with the quiet zones or wayside horns, and having wayside horns would not mean that you don't go forward with quad gates in the future. But if we can get a significant improvement sooner and still have the safety benefit of a horn when and where it's needed, that's an interesting possibility. But so that if we look at why we have been pursuing grade crossings, grade separations, and how we were going about it, we've ranked the South Palo Alto ones as the highest priority. We have, even preceding that, we're focusing on a bike and ped crossing in the vicinity of Loma Verde. And South Palo Alto, some people have asked, why are we doing the South Palo Alto? Because South Palo Alto doesn't have any grade separations from Oregon all the way to San Antonio. And they don't have any separated bike and ped crossings in that entire distance, despite all the kids who are trying to cross. But the biggest driver when this process was set in motion was the projection of a significant increase in trains in the coming years and decades, and a significant increase in cars, and both of those happening at the same time, rush hour. And as a result, the projected gate downtime was going to take highly congested intersections that were near gridlock and make them solid gridlock. That was objective number one. Number two was to improve safety and security. High on the list, and often in recent years we'd kind of not talked about that as much, but it remains as a priority. It was designated that way, and it is going forward. And a third one is kind of environmental impacts, noise and pollution. Now, Caltrain, while we were focused on noise and pollution, they kept reminding us when we get electric trains, some of the good portion of that is going to go down. And as I said last night, it's the number of people who keep going, Pat, the train went by and I almost didn't hear it. It's the train to be seen but not heard. And then we have the remaining horn noise, and we've talked about different approaches there. And then environmentally, that's the other thing. I mean, the soot from diesel trains has been a pollution factor for a long while, aside from the greenhouse gases, but really a health factor. And And this is already a really significant improvement. So out of the reasons that we had to have grade crossings, and we're still going to go forward throughout the corridor with the highest priorities, but we have another problem. And then two things that have changed. So a problem is that the cost of them has gone through the roof. We just had Burlingame, who thought they had the last dollars in hand to get to $315 million and be about ready to put the shovel in the ground, and their cost estimate went to $600 million. And Caltrain is looking up and down the corridor going, what we thought was a corridor-wide, approximately $10 billion project is looking like a $20 billion project, and we didn't have the $10 billion. So then we go back and say, but we had this primary driver. We needed capacity at these crossings. As folks are aware, fixed rail commuter agencies like Caltrain and BART are seeing the slowest transit recovery. We're a little over 40%. We think with electrification, we'll get up to 60 and gradually climb back. And over years, we hope to get back to where we were. But the real driver was anticipated growth in trains and anticipated significant growth in cars. And that also, regionally at least, is mitigated. The population growth for the region is been drastically revised. The regional agencies really haven't recognized it, but that's Caltrans and Department of Finance have said basically statewide no growth and only modest growth in the next 25 years, 35 years, excuse me, in the region compared to what was a very big growth. So then that begs a question that we haven't really talked about is what sort of capacity improvement might be able to be at a location if we put off Churchill once we have the engineering design. And one of the things that our staff has pointed out is that when we get that 15% engineering, we lock in the technical standards and they can't change them on us subsequently. If I understood that right, is that the right way to say it?
Sorry, 35%.
35%, okay. But at that point in time, whatever design we can come up with, they can't change the standards on us at the federal level, correct? Is that federal or state?
Yeah. So once we have it environmentally cleared, we get into the final design. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And we're still, needing to go through this process with Caltrain to hopefully drastically mitigate any property impacts. But we have to go through that process to get to that point. But we have now the ability to look at, well, what additional signal optimization might we be able to do to address capacity? We don't have to do it to the degree that we did before. Back when this process started, there were members of the community who were saying, well, can't we just do signal optimization rather than grade separation? And the answer was that could get us something, but it's not going to solve the problem that we are anticipating. Now we have a lesser problem that we're anticipating. And so how do all these things fit together? And are they, at least for an extended period of time, indefinitely, might they be an alternative to a grade separation at a location that we may not have the money for anyway? So I didn't mean to try to, just to frame the issue, not to solve the issue. But it's a different way of thinking about it. And Caltrain is doing the same rethinking throughout the corridor right now. So we're not alone in that. These same conditions, ability to not only address safety, but security, which has been real high in our community. And the other benefit is that we could do these things faster with drastically lower construction impacts and at a fraction of the cost and actually be able to afford them and get, I don't know, can we get 80% of the problem solved at 5% the cost at 10, 10 or 20% the time frame, and a fraction of the construction impacts. And I think we need to begin the conversation around framing it in those ways and ask ourselves those questions. End of my spiel. All right.
Very good.
Yeah, next meeting.
Yes, Philip, you want to speak to what we got upcoming over the next?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we really have three, well, I should say two kind of major pending items that we've discussed previously. One is the cooperative agreement that we're hoping we can have here in November. Of course, that's pending getting the revised scope from Caltrain and then legal review and all of that, but noting that we think that's unlikely to happen in the next 2 or so weeks in order to make an October meeting. And then the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan update that we have our consultant and our staff available for the November meeting. And then the last item, which is not as significant, but would be a quiet zone update that also would likely happen in November following our diagnostic meeting. Those are the items that staff has on our list.
So what would be October?
Yeah, so we don't currently have any items slated for October, yeah, unless the cooperative agreement comes in very, very quickly, because we would need to do legal review and probably it would go back and forth. So I think that's pretty unlikely.
And would it have to have gone through all the legal review in order for us to have the discussion, or could we?
I think it would be better if at least it can, even if it's not completed, at least our legal feels comfortable with what the agreement says in it before we review it publicly. Yeah, I think that would be preferred. I'm sure legal's not here, but I'm sure they would prefer that.
Yeah, I'd agree that would be preferable. You know, at the same time, why don't we keep that as a point of review, depending on what the issues appear to be as we get the documents back.
And if I might add, the other thing that we now have as part of an intersection of this committee is the multimodal, really a working group led by VTA. And I expect that we'll probably have either most or all of those meetings here in Palo Alto, even though they're VTA meetings, and the VTA is lead agency. And so I'm just meeting with VTA staff in the coming week to kind of think about what the first meeting would be. Maybe what we'd have is, instead of a city rail committee meeting, an inaugural meeting of that. I don't know, but that's a possibility.
So I did want to mention on that, we had hoped that we could have had Jason come to the November meeting to talk about and he was here today, so great, he came sooner, but he's actually not available for the October or November meeting. So we had hoped that he could come to the same meeting where we're talking about the bike and ped plan, so we could have those two things sync up. But he came ahead at this meeting, but we'll see potentially if we can get him to come to a future.
Well, and if it's a VTA meeting, it doesn't have to be on this.
That's right.
Date.
That's right.
Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on Pat's comment at the front of the meeting about the bike ped consultants and the Caltrain station at University Avenue. He was making the point that it would be really great if we could get with the consultants before they've gone too far down the road. We don't want the consultants to come to us with, some documentation that is just wanting to be tweaked around the edges. We really want the opportunity to give input, particularly because there are so many things figuratively and literally intersecting. And we want to be sure that they have the opportunity to be in this rail conversation before they're too far down the road in their own more narrow thinking.
Yeah, so just I guess to reiterate, the reason they're coming to this committee and the other committees that they need to go to is to get that input to shape the product. And this is not the final cut of it either. There's still community engagement that's going on. We're not close to having a final plan. This is another point of input.
I hear that, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm going to believe it. Because I trust you. What can be frustrating on our side of the dais table is when something is brought to us and we're trying to have a meaty conversation, but we're getting the impression that we're saying too much or asking questions that are being asked too late. And we have to take responsibility for not asking questions too late in the game, but we have to be involved early enough in the game in order to be effective.
Yeah, I can assure you that this is not, this is the right time for this.
And
particular
I
piece.
realized after our earlier discussion is what I was really trying to get at is making sure that we were involved with defining what the station access and circulation problems are, as opposed to, we don't want to have it that they've thought they had defined the problems, are already coming to us with their tentative solutions versus the problem definition.
Yeah, well, to be clear, part of what they're doing is providing what the community provided as their challenges. So things that were identified through the community process will be part of what they're presenting.
Okay. And on that one, we will also want to make sure that Stanford is invited because they really have a strong interest in that. And then as we've talked with Caltrain and VTA as well. So that just by default starts being a multi-agency discussion too. Okay. Are we good?
Exciting times.
All right. Thank you all.
Choo-choo.
Yeah.